Hey, it is day 67 on the CDT, and so much happened today. Many videos ago, I don't remember which one, I mentioned that I'd been stuck high when lightning had been hitting like the ridges or the peaks next to me or lakes near me, and I said it happened twice. And one of the goals of this trip was to not let it happen again, and it happened today. So that's to come in just a minute or two. Let me do a little bit of house cleaning or setting up, I guess. As soon as I shut off the video yesterday, the wind changed directions and brought that storm my way, and I immediately set up my tent, got in it. Everything was underneath the tent when the storm hit, and it was dry. But I got rained on again. I got rained on 3 times today, and one of them was literally right now when I'm setting up my tent. It's 6:56. And unfortunately, it was raining while I set up my tent, that's the worst case scenario, because that means that number one, your footprint underneath your tent's going to get wet immediately because you're not setting it on dry ground, unlike yesterday where I could set it on dry ground. The second is your footprint's going to get the bottom of your tent wet, and rain's going to fall on your tent as you're setting it up, no matter how quick you are, which means the inside of your tent's wet. And the third issue is, like, once you get the rain fly up and put everything underneath, everything's already wet, right? Your pack's wet, like your rain jacket's wet, your pack, I should say, the rain cover of your pack is wet, your rain jacket is wet, your clothes are wet, the inside of your tent's wet, everything in your pack is dry because you've had the rain cover on. And the unfortunate thing is, when you put your sleeping pad, when you put your sleeping bag, when you put anything in the tent, it's gonna get wet. Oh, sorry about that. Which is just a really bad situation. Like, my sleeping quilt is down. It's water resistant down, but it's still down. Getting it wet's not the best. My sleeping pad from Xped, it had down inside it, so when it gets wet, it's unhappy. And so essentially, it's gonna be a wet night. So I've lost count now, but essentially since I've left Creed, there's only been 2 days where I have not been rained on directly, and that's most of them, or rain hasn't been in the vicinity, and that's like maybe 3 or 4. I love Colorado. I'm glad we're getting the rain because the snow melted so quickly. This rain's going to help prevent forest fires, hopefully. It's also made everything so green in the mountains. It's absolutely beautiful. The flowers, the trees, like the plants, the blueberry plants, the strawberry plants, like everything is just glowing green. And it's absolutely wonderful. We need the water. We always need the water. But, man, can I just get a stable day of weather? I need from like sun up to sundown a stable day of weather. And that's the setup for today's lightning story. I got up this morning at 4:40 because I was in a place last night with reception and I could check the weather. And the reason why I checked the weather was because I was expecting to go over Mount Edwards, which is a tall 13,000 foot peak. It's either 13.8 or 13.9. And then I was going to go over Gray's Peak, which is 14,200 feet, a 14er. On the way there, I was going to have to summit, I believe, a half dozen 13ers, or maybe a little bit less, maybe 4 or 5 of them. And there was a couple of 12,000 foot peaks. Plus, if anybody's ever seen the ridge from Argentine Pass up to Gray's Peak, you'll know that going up to Mount Edwards, you have, I believe it's three or 4 like mini peaks that you have to go up before you get to Edwards. They're just along the ridge of that mountain. And then once you get from Edwards and you start hiking towards Gray's, again, you have another, I think, 4 or 5 of those just up and down stair steps where you go up, you hit a saddle, you go up, you hit a saddle, you go up, hit a saddle, and eventually you get on the final ridge. And because of the rain last night, the storm that moved in, I didn't get to finish my 4 miles to finish those like 4 or 5 13ers on the way there. Which means I had to do them this morning. And then once I finish those, there's an alternate that I took that's called the Argentine spine. And that's for the CDT, where instead of dropping down very far on a road and then having to come all the way back up on that road to Argentine Pass, you can actually take, I think it may have been the old CDT, or maybe they're thinking about making the CDT, but basically you take a right turn and you go up and down a few mountains. It's like Revenue Mountain, Decatur Mountain, and Silver Mountain. I may be forgetting one. But basically you go up to the first mountain, you drop down to a saddle, you go up to the second mountain, drop down to the saddle, you go up to the third mountain, drop down to a saddle, and then you're going up to the Argentine Ridge, which is extremely steep. I think you start in the 12s and you're ending in like 13.6. Once you get on that ridge, you have to hike over to Argentine Peak, and then you drop down to Argentine Pass, which also has some up and downs. And then once you hit the pass, like you're on your way up going towards Mount Edwards. I'm gonna have to sit, I don't know if it's a 0 day or what, but I'm gonna have to sit down and see how much elevation up and down I did, because it was a boatload. Today was probably the hardest day I've had on the CDT so far. I would say that hiking 29 or 30 miles, like up and over all those passes, they're extremely close, but I didn't have as much elevation up and down so it was 4 miles. The Argentine spine is 6 miles, and then it's 2.5 over to Grays. So basically in 12.5 miles, like going up and over 4 or 5, at 8 or 9 peaks. And you're going, like last night I camped at 12.5, and you're going to go up and over a bunch of 13ers. You're going to drop down below 13,000 foot into 12s, and then go right back up to 13,000 feet on the Argentine Ridge, and then over to Argentine Peak, which is a 13.7, I believe. And then you're going to drop down to the pass, and then you're going to go right back up to Mount Edwards, which is like 13.9, and then up to Grays, which is 14.2. And because Mount Edwards and Grays both are named peaks, that means that their saddle drops below 300 feet. And so you have, a bit of a descent between those two. So I would say today by far was the hardest day on the trail. Physically, the 29 and 30 mile days are 1B and 1C basically. But today was definitely 1A. In total, I did about 24 miles, but the first 12 were definitely taxing. I knew that there was a 70% chance of rain on Grays Peak because of the forecast from last night. I knew that it was going to be later in the day, meaning like early afternoon. So my goal was to get to the top of Grays Peak by 2 p.m. and then get myself down quickly, because that would be about the time that the storms would be hitting. I was accurate on that time. I should have been on top of Grays at 2. I was very close. I was not quite there. So I got up to Mount Edwards and got down from Mount Edwards towards the Saddle of Grays, which is a lot of hands-on rocks. It's not an easy just trail. You're actually having to put your hands on rocks to climb down in many spots. And when I got to the saddle between Mount Edwards and Grays Peak, I ran into 2 hikers. They're not used to hiking at mountains above tree line, especially at 13 and 14,000 feet. They were moving a little bit slow. That's what they said, just because they are not used to, the altitude and having so much elevation, ascent and descent in one day. That's their saying. I'm not putting words in their mouth. The problem was there was a storm over to our left that was extremely nasty. You could see the rain falling, you could hear the thunder. And when I say to the west or to our left, I'm sorry, the south or I believe it was the south or to our left, it was a ways away. It was several mountains away. So I was not concerned about that, and it was moving diagonally away from us. There was another storm that was on our right, but it was behind us. It was east of us, I believe is the direction, northeast of us. It was in the valley where Grays and Torreys, the standard route up Grays and Torreys is, and it was moving away from us. I was not concerned about that one, even though I heard thunder from behind us. The cloud that was over Gray's Peak had been there since about 9:30 or 10 o'clock this morning. It had a light gray hue to it. It had not made a sound, meaning thunder. It hadn't rained all day. It was just hovering there. And so the weather appeared to be stable right around Gray's. And I got to the saddle, and the two folks that are hiking the CDT, they're extremely nice folks. They were a little bit unsettled by the weather around them and how high they were. And the only drop off where we were at the saddle was down to the left. It was a steep drop off. It wasn't a drop off. It was a steep descent down to a lake. But it was definitely, you could lose about 800 to 1,000 feet. And so you weren't going to be high up. You were going to be by a lake, so you had to be careful. But you weren't going to be on the ridge. You weren't going to be the highest thing. And so I told them, I'm going to try to go for the summit because the weather has been stable over Grays, even though there's a cloud above it. I'm going to try to go up there pretty quickly. They wanted some help just navigating that ridge because they're not used to it. And so we had a conversation of what they're supposed to look for navigation wise, where people tread before, all that kind of stuff. I got 0.25, so a quarter mile from the top of Grays, probably 200 feet shy. Like I was over 14,000 feet. I could see the top. I was close. The couple, the husband and wife, they were behind me a little bit, and I had turned a corner so I couldn't see them. And I was keeping my eye on the weather to the left to make sure that it was still moving away. I was keeping my eye on the weather to the right of us to make sure it was moving behind us. And about the time that I stopped to look behind me to see where the folks were, the husband and wife, to make sure they were okay. And again, I was about a quarter mile from the top. When I turned around and looked, I noticed that the wind had changed directions. And that storm that had been behind us on the right suddenly was now moving our direction. When those clouds hit the clouds above Grays, this huge clap of thunder hit, and lightning flashed behind us and lightning flashed to the right of us. It was extremely sudden. It was within minutes. So my concern was that the husband and wife, the couple that were hiking the CDT, would try to turn around and go down the ridge, which is extremely rocky and was slow going, and they would try to go down to I got debris in my tent because it's all wet. I was concerned that they were going to try to go down to that lake that I had pointed out earlier. However, because I've hiked in Colorado, like in any other state, like Wyoming, whatever, I'm not knowledgeable. But because I've hiked in Colorado, I've hiked Edwards before, I've hiked Grays Peak twice. I knew that the switchbacks, there's a cutoff to get to the switchbacks to go down the mountain on that ridge where we were, because if you are coming from Grays over to Edwards and then you got to come back, the switchbacks allow you not to have to summit, and then you can just dump off, and there's a few switchbacks, and then you get into the main switchbacks down Grays Peak, and that's also the CDT. So as soon as I saw the lightning and I heard the thunder, I was hoping that the folks behind me were in view, and they weren't. So I hustled down the mountain, I hustled down the ridge to get in view of them, and was yelling at them that, hey, the down is up here. We got to come up here. And unfortunately, multiple things happened. One, freezing rain was hitting us, so everybody was wearing their rain gear, and it made everything loud, so they couldn't hear what I was saying. Two, they one of the couple was extremely upset, frightened about the lightning and the thunder, the lightning specifically, and how high they were. And so I found this out later when we were down at the trailhead and the weather had cleared and everyone could think clearly. I found out that one of the people with their backpack, their hair started standing up, and they had an ice axe on their backpack. That is a clear sign that lightning's in the area, and you need to get that backpack off of you like pronto, because it's picking up that ice axe, or maybe it's picking up your trekking poles. But when your hair starts standing up, like that's one of the signs of like, you get rid of this stuff quickly and get away from it. A second sign is if you hear humming, like if you have an ice axe or a trekking pole, a metal trekking pole, and you start hearing a vibration or a humming, get rid of that thing quickly, because again, there's electricity in the air and it's picking up on whatever it can pick up on. So the couple had taken off their packs to put on their rain gear because again, the freezing rain, but when the lightning hit, and so neither one of them had their packs on, and they were getting into the lightning position, which is great. The unfortunate thing is lightning position on top of a ridge, you're still high. And so I made my way down quickly and said, the down is up here. We need to come up here. We need to come up here to get off this ridge and start going down the CDT. We're not going to get to do grays today. Like we're done. And one of the people had fear. They were in the lightning position and would not budge. I asked them, some hikers were hiking by. I wanted to see who it was. So I asked that person, to look me in the eyes, and I said, we have to get down. Like, you need to stand up. You need to take my hand. We need to get you to the cutoff so you can start going down. The other person had put on their pack and had started hiking back up to where I was leading the other person. The definition of courage is when you are faced with fear and you do the thing you have to do anyway. Like, that's courage. The person who was afraid in the lightning position and didn't want to get up, they got up, took my hand, and hiked up to where the cutoff was. At that point, their partner had caught up, and the partner had the backpack on that belonged to them, and they had the trekking poles for both people, but couldn't lug up the backpack for the other person. So I told the partner, you need to get your partner down. I will go get the other backpack and get down quickly. And they did. They started heading down. They moved very rapidly. Again, courage. When you are full of fear, yet you're doing the thing that you know you have to do to help yourself, like that. There's a line in the musician Passenger has a song called Home, and it talks about, like, I was in my head, I was thinking about that as I hiked down, but they talk about, like, courage is looking fear in the eye and doing the thing you need to do. You may ask why brain radio was clicking on while I'm in this lightning situation. I don't know. It's, as I'm hiking down, I need something to keep tempo, and like I'm repeating a mantra of like no injuries, no lightning strikes, keep everyone safe. And then like the passenger song would sing because of the courage. I don't know. My brain's weird. But I went back and got the partner's backpack, carried it carried it to the cutoff and carried it down to I don't know how long it was, but basically the rain, like the thunderstorm with the lightning, had passed, the rain had stopped, and then I was able to get it back to the people. It still had the ice axe on it, so did I take a risk? Yes, but I felt that the storm was moving out of the area, the wind was pushing it out, so I felt comfortable enough to grab the pack and bring it down. I never want to be high when there's lightning. And the fact that I got so close to the summit of Grays, which is the high point on the CDT, but I didn't get to go to the top, I'm okay with. I got above 14,000 feet. I've been to the top of Grays twice already in my life, or 3 times, I don't remember. And I didn't need to get to that summit. I'm all right with that. It's kind of interesting that the first 14er that I hiked was Grays and Torreys. It's actually 2 peaks, but many people hike them together because they share a saddle or a ridge. And it was the 4th of July 2006. I was hiking with my friend Dan, and we got snowed on the 4th of July on top of Grays. We hiked Torreys first through the Chihuahua Gulch, and then we passed over to Grays, and then we got snowed on. Fast forward 16 years later, and missed it by 1 day. It's the 3rd of July, and I'm standing near the top of Grays with freezing rain dumping on me July 3rd. But this time there's lightning. Like, there wasn't lightning when Dan and I were at the top of it. It's just interesting how 16 years later, history kind of repeated itself, just a little bit nastier this time. The weather moved in quickly. Like I said, the 2 storms were a distance away from us. The wind changed, and within minutes, that one storm that was behind us backtracked and basically overtook us. There were warning signs with like the hair standing up, that kind of stuff. I've replayed it. I had a 7-mile descent, and then I think 5 or 6 miles on the road coming down from the trailhead to think about it. So it's been like 12 miles since I was at the top, and I've replayed it in my mind over and over and over again to see what I should have done differently or what I could have done differently. On any day that I'm hiking Grays Peak, that looks stable. Like, was there weather in the area? Yes. It was being blown in different directions away from us. Would I have gone from the summit on another day? If I was at that same location, meaning only like 200 feet below the summit? Of course not after the weather changed, but like if I was standing on the saddle looking at the situation, would I have gone for the summit? The answer is yes. Because I live in Colorado, I knew there was a cutoff, and if the weather turned nasty, I could dump down the switchbacks. So that doesn't change anything. I felt really responsible for the 2 people. They were concerned about the weather on the saddle of Edwards and Grays. We couldn't have gone anywhere. Like, dumping down to that lake is fine, but we would have had to come back up that lake eventually, like the next day or whenever the weather cleared. And lightning can hit those lakes, those high alpine lakes. I've seen it happen. That was the second time I got stuck high. I watched as the lightning struck a lake several times, and the lake was below us. I felt responsible because the people were a bit unsettled about the weather, and I kind of calmed their concerns a little bit and let them know, like, okay, we need to have a strategy, we need to have a plan if things go wrong. You know, this is the approach we need to take, that kind of stuff. But when that storm behind us, when the wind shifted it towards us, and within minutes, you know, it's throwing thunder and lightning, my first thought was, those two people behind me trusted me, and they continued to go up, and now they're stuck in a nasty situation. So I wanted to make sure to get them down safe. And that's why I headed back down the mountain to make sure they weren't going to dump into the lake, because they were so close to the cutoff on the other side. That's why I made sure that they were moving down the mountain. That's why I carried their pack, because, again, I felt responsible. And that's, I think, probably why I was, you know, saying mantras of, you know, no lightning strikes, no injuries, you know, keep everyone safe, because I wanted to make sure these people weren't traumatized by a situation that 30 minutes before was a stable situation. When you're hiking in the high country in Colorado, you got to be vigilant. And the fact that that storm, like the wind changed so quickly and that storm came back on us, it just goes to show that when you're hiking, you don't, like, if there's weather in the area, you don't know where it's going to go. You have to watch. Like last night in my tent, I'm watching a storm over to the north. The wind changes directions, and then it's over on top of my tent. The same thing happened today, just more aggressively, because it was a thunderstorm and it contained lightning, and we were at a high altitude. So it's just another reminder of being mindful of the weather in the area and making good decisions. There were when that storm hit, there were 3 people that were heading up to the top of Torreys. We could see them on the ridge. They were about 2/3 of the way up the ridge. That storm did not last long. Less than 30 minutes, I would say, 25 minutes. When that storm stopped throwing freezing rain and lightning and thunder at us, those 3 people continued up Torreys, even though the clouds are still in the area. It's not worth it. I think it was, I don't believe it was David Brashears. I think it was Ed Viesturs. Ed Viesturs is one of the premier American alpinists. And I believe in one of his books, he said that people all the time ask him, like, how he's survived when other people, like his friends, have passed away in mountaineering accidents. And Ed says getting to the top is only half the journey. It's only halfway. If you can't get down, then getting to the top doesn't matter. And as I saw those 3 hikers continue up Torreys, even though the clouds were still swirling around and the weather was still in the area, I just thought to myself, yeah, I didn't get to the top of Grays, but I made a solid decision with the 2 people who I felt responsible for. And I think that's why I'm at peace that I didn't summit Grays, because we made it down, all 3 of us. So today's shout out is to courage, because the one person who had fear and looked me in the eye with that fear and understood that they had to go down, and they went down despite the fear, like, that takes courage. I hope everyone's well. I know it's a longer video, but I'll talk to you folks tomorrow.